We have a very special guest here, Mr. Severin Fayerman, who was born in Bendzin, Poland in 1922. During World War II, he survived imprisonment and forced labor at Auschwitz and Buchenwald concentration camps. He was reunited with his family after the war. He immigrated to the United States in search of a new life. In 1946, the Fayermans purchased the Baldwin Tool and Die Company in Newark, New Jersey. Together, they transformed the small metal forming business into a world-class operation. Severin is the author of a survivor's story, his memoirs. And if I could just add a little note, if you have questions, if you could please save them at the end, Mr. Fayerman will be available right here at the front table. Okay? So thank you.
Thank you. You know, when I have been asked to come and talk to you, I accepted it willingly without any reservations. Also, it is very painful for me to talk about my experiences in German concentration camps. When I came to this wonderful country of ours, the only thing I wanted to do is to forget what happened to me. I met a lovely young American girl, married her, had a family, started a business, mingled it. I want to be an American. I want to forget what happened to me. However, there was an incident that occurred very early during my incarceration in Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, we worked every day of the week. However, on this fateful day, we were told there'd be no work. Early in the morning, 2 officers of the SS that guarded us came into our barracks with a number of guards, told us to strip naked and to form a line. When my time came in, I stood at attention. They told me to turn around, face them again, and they said, go to the right. And the guard said, you can get dressed. However, some of the prisoners that began to show the sign of malnutrition, maybe their eyes were bulging, maybe their ribs were showing, or maybe they were unsteady as they approached the officers. All of those were told to go to the left. Upon that, the guards took the number that each prisoner had tattooed on his left forearm. My number happened to be 171952. I took the number down, released the prisoner, and got him dressed. Another week passed by, same thing occurred. Today, no work. Early in the morning, the guards came in with a list they had brought from the previous visit and start calling these numbers to come toward them, toward the entrance of the camp. A father of a very, very close friend of mine, his number was called. As he came by me, he stopped and said, Severin, avenge my innocent death. Don't let the world forget what's going to happen to me today. I stood over there, moved with the emotion of the moment. I said, I will. He left the barracks and he perished that day. So when I survived the war, I was wondering, how do I accomplish the pledge? How I'm going to avenge his death? Kill somebody? Of course I couldn't do it. That would make no sense. And this is what I decided, that the only way I can make sure that this is not forgotten and his death is not forgotten. Millions of others that died only because of the wrong color of the skin, according to the German government, or wrong religion, or belonging to the party that the government has not approved. So hopefully all these people didn't die in vain. And this is really why I continue to speak. So let me start with the beginning. How did I get in Auschwitz in the first place? I was born very shortly after the end of World War I in a newly created country called Poland. For a number of years, the area in which I was born, Silesia, was under the German occupation. And the population was Polish and also spoke German. I went to high school in which I took English as an additional language. When I was in high school, I also joined the ROTC. ROTC was, if anyone was a member of ROTC in a high school, he could eventually go to the officer's school. And I thought it would be better be an officer than an enlisted man. That's why I joined ROTC. When World War II broke out, I joined the Polish army. Unfortunately, the Polish army was no match for the very well-oiled German war machine. All we did is to retreat and retreat from the onslaught of the German army. Eventually, Russia declared war on Poland, entered from the eastern border. So one day we squeezed between the two armies, and our officers came by and said, "Okay, boys, war's over for you. You can go home." Well, I didn't have a uniform. I just had a band with an eagle and a rifle and ammunition. I dropped it and I took the band off and went home. When I returned home, I found out that all schools were closed for Poles. So I happened to come from a family of blacksmiths. My grandfather was a blacksmith, and for generations, every Fayerman was a blacksmith. However, my grandfather was a very enterprising individual. Not only did he shoe horses, repair wagons, but he also started a manufacturing operation, making bolts, screws, and nuts. I asked to join the company, and I decided to have my grandfather train me how to become a blacksmith. Once I have learned how to become a blacksmith, my grandfather turned me over to the tool makers. Tools are a very integral and very important part of the manufacturing operation, and he thought it would be good for me to learn how to become a tool maker. However, the war was progressing. In the interim, America entered the war and began destroying many parts of Germany, of the western part of Germany. Hitler also declared the area in which we live to be Judenrein, which means in English, free of Jews. And I happen to live in a city in which there was a predominant Jewish population. Poland, before World War II, had like about 6.5 million Jews live in their country, about 30 million. In our city was no exception. We had a lot of Jewish people. So when the Jews were expelled, the city nearly became empty. So the German government decided to bring in some of the Germans that lost their property to the eastern part, far away from American things. Therefore, the Germans slowly began to arrive to our city. Also, in a manufacturing which operated, we became limited in ability to operate it freely. The German government has sent in a supervisor called German Treuhändler, who really became a director. And once this fellow learned how to operate the business, he became very antagonistic, and we began to feel that we have truly an enemy in our midst. At that time too, the Germans decided to create a forced labor camp in our town. As a matter of fact, during World War II, practically every major city in Germany had a forced labor camp, and our city was no exception. They simply arrested Poles on the street, asked them for their documents. If they were not working in the war import industry, they were arrested. One Sunday morning, police knocked on our door and arrested our entire family. I lived there with my father, my mother, and my uncle. We assumed that this was instigated by the supervisor that really became so antagonistic and wanted to get rid of us. There was a good chance of doing so. So we were brought to the camp, which actually what the Germans did, they just surrounded part of the city with barbed wire and called it a camp. And the camp name was Kamionka. We were supervised by police, and we had relatively easy work with them. If you can imagine the movie Stalag 17, this is more or less the relation we had with the guards. The work was not difficult, and we continued cleaning the houses. Germans slowly, little by little, continued to occupy them. Eventually the work was done and finished, and our commandant gathered us together and said, well, you have done a very good job, thank you. However, once in our hands, you have to remain for the duration of the war. And she said, I'm going to have to send you to another camp. Very unfortunately, the city of Bendzin, in which I was born, was only like 35 miles north of Auschwitz, and our camp was sent to Auschwitz. I don't think I'll ever forget my first entry to Auschwitz. I had no idea what a horrible and incredible camp this was. We were brought in cattle cars, and when the train arrived at the main siding of the camp, we were told to get off the plane, of the train, and when women and men were separated. My mother went to stand with the women. I was with my father and my uncle. There was another officer at close distance motioning us to come to him and to form the lines of 5. Older people, children, and youngsters were told to stand aside. The trucks will come and take them to the camp. The younger individuals, the officer said, have to march. You will be taken by the truck to the camp. Later on, I found out that all the trucks went directly to the guest chambers. Only healthy men and women were allowed to enter the camp. By the time we came to the main gate, it was very dark. And we were told it's too late to get us into the camp today. We will be, however, inducted next morning. That night, I laid on the floor on a large building with my father and my uncle. My father turned to me and said, you know, Severin, imagine we were caught by bandits. They may kill us, maybe not. If we ever survive, remember, let's gather in a grandmother's home in Salzburg in Austria. I promise to do so if I survive. In the morning, an officer came into our room and told us to put all the money on the table. I had a billfold and a watch, a wristwatch, which I left on the table. A number of prisoners then were told to go to the next room. In the next room, we were stripped naked, and all the hair was shaved on my body, except for eyebrows and eyelashes. A number was tattooed on my left forearm. My number is 171952. And then we were ushered into showers. After we showers, we received clothes which were prison garb, striped pajamas, pants and jacket, pair of wooden shoes, a round, so to say, head without visor, a bowl, a cup, and a spoon. With this, I was ushered into a quarantine camp. The Germans created a quarantine camp in order to test the ability of the people to do hard work with very little food. Who could not continue to do the hard work was simply eliminated. What I told you at the very beginning was one of those eliminations that occurred every 6 to 8 weeks. Well, maybe the best way for me to describe what was the life in Auschwitz is to tell you what was it like a day of a prisoner in Auschwitz. We slept in the large buildings, about 750 prisoners on wooden shelvings, 5 prisoners per shelving, 3 high, on wooden shelves with straw mattresses. We received a blanket to cover ourselves. In the morning, we awakened, it was still dark, and we went to the latrines, cleaned up, and breakfast was served. Breakfast consisted of lukewarm tea, no sugar in it, and then with this we were told to step outside, and to form working brigades. I happened to be assigned for digging trenches. Trenches were required because the crematoriums operated 24 hours a day, and tremendous amount of ashes and human remains needed to be buried. And therefore, the crew that I was assigned to was digging trenches every day. It was very hard work. We're surrounded by guards all the time, and they keep on pushing us and rushing us to do the work as hard, as quickly as we can. At lunch, at 12 o'clock, lunch was served. Lunch consisted of lukewarm soup, very watery, and practically sometimes you were lucky to find a potato or some turnip. That's all, a 30 minutes break, and that was the end of lunchtime. Afternoons were worse. The prisoners were more tired, the guards were more nervous, beat more prisoners, and that's all you needed to get is to be beaten. At the end of the day, we collected our tools and marched into the camp. As we marched in, the music was playing, and we have to march in military fashion, as Germans treated us like an army in a camp. However, we're not allowed to enter the barracks until all the camps were counted. Auschwitz consisted of 5 large camps, each one about 20,000 prisoners. It took an awful long time to be counted, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 and longer. It rained, it snowed, it really was a very miserable part of the day. Eventually, however, the all clear sounded, siren sounded, we allowed to re-enter the camp, the barracks. As we got in the barracks, dinner was served. Dinner consisted of a 4-inch piece square of bread, very unappetizing, with wood chips in it, One day a bit of margarine, the next a piece of sausage, the third day a bit of marmalade. That's all for dinner. Of course, not enough to sustain you to do the hard work the Germans wanted us to do. So how do you survive the camp? The only way to survive the camp was to obtain additional food. And that was my endeavor the minute I devoured the dinner. I looked around and see where I can get some more food. I noticed that some of the prisoners were not sleeping on shelvings but on cots, and I found out were sort of a privilege. They were craftsmen and therefore were given extra food. I approached them and asked them if they would be willing to take me on as their servant. So three of them hired me, and I did mend their socks, clean their clothes, and did whatever they want me to do. For that, they shared their food with me. However, a fortunate thing occurred in my camp. In each one of the camps, there was one German prisoner. Hitler emptied all the prisons and brought those criminals into the concentration camp and made them supervisors. A supervisor in our camp was a petty thief from Frankfurt, Germany. And this individual wanted to learn how to speak English. So he sent the word through the barracks to, is there anyone need to speak English? Since I took English in high school, I volunteered. Of course, I knew he didn't know the difference, so I pretended that I have been in England. And I started teaching him English. Well, that changed my life. I didn't have to go to work anymore. The couple, the supervisor had a lot of privileges, and I stayed in the barracks and did a little bit chores and taught him English. But even better things occurred. Siemens Electric Company, one of the largest manufacturers in the world of electrical equipment, now doing business in America, came to Auschwitz looking for tool makers. I applied, I went through a rigorous examination, and I was taken out of Auschwitz and went to a factory. So therefore, really, how come that you're able to see me today standing in front of you is because I did not spend all my time in Auschwitz, but I was taken into a factory. There I was treated well. It was a very modern, large operation, and I actually improved my skills as a tool maker, so I took advantage of my imprisonment to become a better craftsman. However, the war was slowly coming to an end. Russia broke through Eastern Front and approached Auschwitz. We were taken out of Auschwitz and were shipped to another camp called Buchenwald. It was a very arduous trip. It took about close to 10 days in freezing weather. About 80% of prisoners died of starvation and cold. Fortunately, I survived, and as I arrived to Buchenwald, I found out this was a large quarry with a very dangerous operations, many accidents occurring practically every day. However, fortunately for me, the United States Air Force have been destroying so many cities nearby that rather than send me to the quarry, I was sent to various cities to clear the rubble. Where again, fortunately, I was able to find some food among the ruins, and Germans, seeing our very poor shape, left sometimes stale bread or leftover food, which we of course ate with gusto. Siemens, being a very well organized company, was able to locate me in Buchenwald and had me transferred to the headquarters in Berlin. And I started working in a huge operation, about 5 or 6 city blocks of gigantic manufacturing operation. I even improved my skill even more because this was absolutely a top-class operation. However, by that time, the American Air Force bombarded Berlin every day. You could wind your watch. At about 10:30 in the morning, the American bombers who arrived, destroy part of the city, fly away. Same thing in the evening. About 10:30 in the evening, the British night bombers would come and do the same thing day in and day out. One night, the British night bombers came over Siemens, who went to the shelters, and they truly destroyed the company completely. They did an unbelievable job completely destroying the operation. Well, I was, of course, out of a job, and I went back to the camp, which was about 5 blocks away, waiting for further developments. Well, within the next few days, American planes flew over our camp and started dropping incendiary bombs. There was about 1,000 prisoners in the camp. We went into the open trenches, awaiting, of course, the end of the bombardment. Well, at the very end, smaller American planes appeared and start shooting up the guards who were in the towers. It really was a miraculous operation. I have never seen or heard of anything like it. How great accuracy of the American airmen. There was over 1,000 prisoners in the trenches, and none of them were hurt. All of the guards were either shot or wounded. I could have really escaped. However, I had no money. I didn't know anybody in Berlin. I was in prison garb. I decided to wait. Well, soon enough, police came up, rounded us up, and took me to another camp. This camp was Sachsenhausen. Sachsenhausen was a large camp at the outskirts of Berlin, sort of the Hitler's and his cohorts' preferred camp. Most of the heads of the governments that Germany has conquered were imprisoned over there. Jacob Stalin, who was a son of Joseph Stalin, was a general in the Russian army, was captured. He was there, and most of the very important individuals. And also, you may be surprised to hear a lot of Germans were there, a lot of clergymen, practically entire blocks and blocks. There was nothing but the German clergymen. Every day in the morning, a number of civilians, German civilians, were brought from Berlin, and they were stood outside the main near the main entrance. Their bodies were painted with black paint. A big sign was hung on them saying, "I am a criminal." They stood there all day. In the evening, they lined them against the wall and shot them. This is how the Germans were treated, some of their own individual citizens, which apparently were caught maybe doing something illegal. However, again, the war was really coming to an end. Russia approached Berlin and started the bombardment. Well, the Germans then again took us out of Berlin, and I went on my, so to say, last death march. The purpose of the march was to get us to Norway. Somehow Hitler in his last delirious days decided that German army going to retreat to Norway, and then we prisoners will go over there, dig the trenches, and they're going to fight to the end. This will be the Valhalla, the glory of the German nation. Of course, it never occurred, fortunately, because as I was marching up the road, I've realized that the German army was disintegrating. I could see pieces of equipment laying along the road. As we passed through the towns, there were haggard expressions on the faces of number of the individuals. I've realized the war is coming to an end. One evening, as we were bedding up at night, we slept in the forest. Remember, it is spring. It was April. Northern Germany is quite cold. So when we got to the various little forests to sleep at night, we laid out the blankets. 4 or 5 guys laid down and covered ourselves with blankets just to keep warm. One night, Red Cross trucks arrived. Absolutely a miracle, something I never can imagine and explain. For the years I became a director of the Red Cross because I consider that they have performed a true miracle. How did they find us in the middle of Germany at night? I could never understand. However, they did arrive and brought K rations. Every one of the prisoners, the Germans opened a K ration, took out whatever good food, chocolate and cigarettes, and each prisoner received one item. I happened to receive their can of dried milk. That's the only subsistence I received on the entire march. Eventually, one night, we were located in a quarry. Again, we bedded down on the bottom of the quarry, and in the morning as I woke up and looked around, I noticed that most of the guards were gone. So I climbed out of the quarry. I speak German fluently, so I asked one of the guards that's standing, "What's going on? Where's everybody going?" He said, "Well, the Americans are coming. You can go. You're free." Well, I assure you, he didn't have to say it twice. I ran quickly down. I told my friends, "Look, we're free. Let's get out of here. Let's find the Americans." It was a beautiful day in the spring, April, as I said. We were marching up the road looking for the Americans, and it was a long day. We were tired. At the very end of the day, I saw an unfamiliar tank I've never seen before, an unfamiliar soldier. There was a GI standing in the middle of the road with a gun pointed at the oncoming traffic. And we approached him. He looked at our bedraggled look and waved us across the tank. I was saved by the American Army that was rushing along the North Sea because the Germans developed at the very end a bomb called a Vbomb. That I think went from V1 to about V8 or V9. It was a rocket shot on the edge, shot out from the edge of the launched from the edge of the North Sea across the channel. Once it arrived over a British city, the motor stopped and the bomb dropped up, destroying a large area. There was no way of stopping it, so the only way the American Army was preventing from these rockets to be sent out was to occupy the area from which they were being launched. And this is what that saved me. Once on the other side of the tank, two American officers came by and said, "Wait here, we'll take you to one of the detention camps." I was taken then to a camp in Lübeck, which is a port city. Actually, the United Nations took over a German submarine school and converted into a reception camp. Prisoners were coming from all over the countryside, and there they were sorted out and eventually sent to their original homes. After I regained some strength, I got some food in me, I remember what my father told me, and I asked permission to leave the camp and go to find them. Eventually, I reached Salzburg, and I came to Salzburg. I forgot where my grandmother's house is, so I went to the office of the prisoners of war. There, a gentleman sitting behind a desk sat over there, and I told him who I am. I speak German again fluently, and he didn't answer anything. Then eventually I repeated it. He came up from the desk, stood in front of me, said, "You know, you are the first person I can tell that the whole family is here. Your father and your mother are asking about you every day. I know where your grandmother lives. I'll take you there." So thus I was reunited with my family. They all survived, completely unscathed, and waiting for me. I was the last one to arrive. My father went back to Poland, found out that the Polish government had nationalized the company, so returned back and says, "Well, the only thing we can do is emigrate." At that time, President Truman made possible for displaced persons to come to America. I applied with my family, and we were accepted, and eventually we arrived to New York. And as we came to the Bay of New York, the immigration people got on board, and we had no paper, no money, so I gave everybody $20 and a handshake, a piece of paper in lieu of passport, and with this we landed in west side of New York. Within a week, everybody had a job, and in the fall of that year, it's the year 1946, my father turned to me and said, "You know, Severin, it's a wonderful country. We should really see if we can find a little business to buy." So, since I was most fluent in English, he asked me to look through the New York Times. One day I saw an ad saying Baldwin, Tool and Die for sale in Newark, New Jersey. I took a train to New Jersey, met the owner who happened to be of German descent. So I sort of schmoozed him out. I was born in Germany, not exactly true. Anyways, we made a deal. and he wanted $20,000, which we didn't have. All we were able to accumulate was $6,000. So we made a deal. We gave him $5,000 cash and opened the doors with $1,000. The rest of it is a story of American dream. This company we built up to a corporation of international fame with sales now of hundreds of millions of dollars. And every president of the United States, when they leave their office, puts Baldwin hardware on it. And so as you can hear, my very sad story that started in a concentration camp ended happily in America. The only country in the world that could happen. God bless our country, and thank you for my attention. I like standing ovation. Thank you.